Fear is a trick of the mind, a shadow that looms larger than the reality it projects. It thrives on what might happen rather than what is. But what if you could see fear for what it truly is, an illusion? Imagine stepping beyond the boundaries it sets, not by fighting it, but by flowing with the rhythm of life itself. To become fearless is not to conquer the world, but to understand that you and the world are inseparable. It's about seeing uncertainty not as a threat, but as an open horizon of infinite possibilities. Today, let's explore what it truly means to embrace life courageously and wholeheartedly. Fear is one of the most pervasive forces in the human experience, yet it exists only in the realm of thought. It is not a tangible entity that you can touch or see, rather, it is a construct of the mind, born from the imagination. Fear feeds on anticipation, painting vivid pictures of potential outcomes that often never come to pass. When you stop and truly examine it, you realize that fear lives not in the present moment, but in the projections of the future or the regrets of the past. It is an illusion, a mirage conjured by your thoughts, and like all illusions, it fades when seen for what it truly is. The first step in dismantling fear is to observe it. Most people don't pause long enough to question the nature of their fears, they simply react to them. Fear whispers in your ear, creating urgency and panic, convincing you that danger is imminent. But what happens when you step back and look at it? You start to notice that fear is a storyteller weaving tales of doom and failure. These stories often have little to do with the reality of your situation. By observing your fears with curiosity rather than judgment, you can begin to untangle the threads of their narrative. Imagine for a moment standing at the edge of a cliff. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and your mind is flooded with images of falling. This fear feels very real. Your body responds as if the fall is already happening. But step back and ask yourself, are you falling right now? The answer is no. Your fear is not about what is happening, it's about what might happen. This distinction is crucial because it reveals the power fear holds over your mind. It is not the edge of the cliff that terrifies you, it is your mind's projection of what could go wrong. The truth is, fear thrives on this kind of imaginative energy. It cannot survive in the present moment because the present is too grounded, too real for fear's illusions to take hold. When you anchor yourself in the now, fear begins to lose its grip. Take a deep breath and look around. What do you see? What do you feel? Right now, in this very moment, are you safe? Most often, the answer is yes. This simple act of grounding yourself in the present dismantles fear's power because it strips it of its foundation, the imagined future. This is not to say that fear has no purpose. Fear, in its purest form, is a survival mechanism. It alerts you to immediate threats and prepares your body to respond. But this kind of instinctual fear is different from the fear that paralyzes you in daily life. The latter is often unnecessary, a leftover artifact of an overactive mind. By recognizing this distinction, you can begin to respond to fear with clarity rather than being consumed by it. The mind is a master creating scenarios, but you are not your mind. You are the observer of your thoughts, the awareness behind them. When you realize this, you can watch fear rise and fall without identifying with it. It is like watching a storm pass through the sky. You are not the storm, you are the sky, vast and unchanging. This perspective allows you to hold space for fear without letting it dictate your actions. Ultimately, fear is as fragile as it is powerful. It thrives on attention and diminishes in the light of awareness. When you see fear for what it is, a fleeting thought, a momentary sensation, you reclaim your power. You no longer have to run from it or fight it, you simply let it be. In doing so, you liberate yourself from its control. Fear loses its ability to hold you back, and you step into a life of greater freedom and possibility. Life is not a battle to be won or a puzzle to be solved. It is a current to be experienced, a flow to be embraced. Yet so many of us approach it with resistance, clutching to our certainties, clinging to control. We brace ourselves against the unknown, and in doing so, we create friction and inner struggle that manifests as fear. This resistance is the root of much of our suffering, for fear thrives in the gap between what we want life to be and what it is. To dissolve fear, we must understand the nature of life itself. It is not static and it cannot be held. Life moves like a river, ever changing, and it invites you to move with it. Consider a river as it flows. It doesn't fight its course, it bends and twists, it adapts. When a rock appears in its path, the river does not resist, it flows around it. This is the essence of living fearlessly, letting go of the futile attempt to control the uncontrollable and instead moving with life's currents. Resistance is what gives fear its strength. When you resist uncertainty, when you resist change, you give power to the very things you wish to avoid. But when you release that resistance, fear loses its footing. Many of us are taught to fight life, to push against its challenges as though they are obstacles to overcome. We are conditioned to believe that if we can just exert enough force, we can shape life to our will. But life is not a solid wall that can be broken down. It is a wave that must be ridden. To resist it is to exhaust yourself. Imagine standing in the ocean trying to stop the waves from coming to shore. No matter how strong or determined you are, the waves will continue. The wiser choice is to swim with them, to align yourself with their rhythm. Fear often arises when we believe life should be something other than what it is. We fear the unknown because it defies our expectations. We fear change because it disrupts our sense of stability. But what if you approached life not with expectations but with openness? When you stop demanding that life conform to your desires, you free yourself from the constant tension of unmet expectations. In that freedom, fear has no room to grow. Letting go does not mean giving up or resigning yourself to passivity. It means trusting the flow of life, recognizing that you are part of a much larger movement. The universe has its rhythm, and you are not separate from it. By aligning yourself with this rhythm, you find that life carries you in ways you could never have imagined. This alignment is not about control, but about cooperation, about becoming a willing participant in the dance of existence. Think of a surfer riding a wave. They do not control the ocean, they cannot dictate the size or speed of the wave. What they can do is learn to move with it, to balance and adapt. Fearless living is much the same. It is not about eliminating the waves of life, but learning to ride them with grace. The more you resist, the more likely you are to fall. But when you surrender to the wave, when you flow with it, you discover a kind of freedom that no amount of control could ever provide. This does not mean life will always be easy. There will be storms, there will be challenges. But even in these moments, you have a choice: resist and be overwhelmed, or flow and adapt. Fear loses its power when you trust that, no matter how turbulent the waters may seem, the river always finds its way. Life is resilient, and so are you. The flow will carry you if you allow it. When you embrace life as a flow rather than a fight, you begin to see its beauty in every twist and turn. Even the moments of uncertainty become opportunities, not threats. Fear is not the enemy, resistance is. By letting go, by trusting the current, you find that fear no longer controls you. You become fearless not because life becomes predictable, but because you no longer need it to be. You have found your place in the flow, and that is where true freedom lies. Uncertainty is the foundation of existence. Life in its essence is unpredictable and undefined, yet it is within this very unpredictability that its beauty resides. Many people live their lives clinging to the illusion of control, believing that safety lies in certainty. But the truth is, there is no certainty, only the perception of it. To fear the unknown is to fear the very nature of life itself. What if, instead of resisting uncertainty, you chose to embrace it? What if you saw it not as a threat, but as a source of freedom, a doorway to infinite possibilities? The unknown is where creation begins. Every breakthrough, every adventure, every meaningful experience arises from stepping into what you cannot fully see or understand. When you fear the unknown, you limit yourself to the familiar, to the confines of what has already been. Life becomes a loop, a repetition of what you already know. But the magic of life exists beyond that loop, in the realm of the uncharted. To embrace uncertainty is to open yourself to growth, to evolution, to the extraordinary. think of a blank canvas. At first glance it is empty, undefined, perhaps even intimidating, but it is precisely this emptiness that makes it full of potential. You can create anything upon it. There are no rules, no limits, no expectations. Uncertainty is like that blank canvas. It is not empty, it is full of possibility. Every moment of not knowing holds within it the seeds of something new, something you have yet to discover. To become fearless is to see the unknown not as a void, but as a gift. Consider how much of your life has been shaped by moments of uncertainty. The first time you tried something new, the first time you met someone who became important to you, or the times you took risks that led to unexpected rewards. None of these moments were guaranteed, yet they brought richness and depth to your life. Uncertainty, when embraced, becomes a gateway to experiences that expand your world. Fear of it, on the other hand, keeps you trapped in a cage of sameness, preventing you from stepping into the fullness of life. It is natural to feel fear in the face of uncertainty, but this fear is not a signal to retreat, it is an invitation to grow. The discomfort of not knowing is a sign that you are standing at the edge of transformation. Growth does not happen in the comfort of the known, it happens when you step into the unknown and trust yourself to navigate it. Fear, in this context, is not an obstacle but a guide, pointing you toward the areas where you have the most to gain. When you embrace uncertainty, you begin to see it as freedom. It frees you from the need to predict, to plan, to control every outcome. This freedom is not chaos, it is openness. It is the realization that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The more you trust in this mystery, the more fearless you become. You stop trying to force life into a shape that makes sense to your mind and instead allow it to unfold in ways that surprise and delight you. Uncertainty also teaches you resilience. When you stop fearing the unknown, you start to see yourself as capable of handling whatever comes your way. You recognize that the strength to adapt, to grow, to thrive is already within you. The fear of uncertainty is rooted in a lack of trust in yourself and trust in life. By embracing the unknown, you build that trust. You learn that no matter what happens, you can find your way. Ultimately, uncertainty is not the enemy, it is the essence of life. To resist it is to resist living fully. To embrace it is to step into the flow of existence with courage and curiosity. The unknown is not a void to be feared, but a frontier to be explored. It is where the adventure of life truly begins. By welcoming uncertainty, you free yourself from the limitations of fear and open yourself to the infinite possibilities that await you. In that openness, you find a fearlessness that allows you to live boldly, authentically, and fully. Fear often thrives on the illusion of separation. It whispers to us that we are alone, vulnerable, and at odds with the vastness of the world. It convinces us that life is an external force we must defend ourselves against, a series of external threats waiting to knock us down. But this illusion of separateness is the foundation upon which fear builds its walls. To dismantle those walls, you must understand that you are not separate from life, you are an integral part of it. When this truth settles in, fear begins to lose its power over you. Imagine a drop of water in the ocean. Does the drop fear the waves? Does it worry about being lost or overwhelmed? It doesn't, because it knows it is not separate from the ocean, it is the ocean. In the same way, you are not an isolated being fighting against the forces of the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself, a part of the whole that is inseparable from its source. This realization shifts your perspective from one of isolation to one of connection, and in that connection, fear finds no foothold. Fear thrives on the belief that you are a small, fragile entity subject to the whims of a chaotic world. But the truth is, you are not small and the world is not chaotic. Everything in life, from the grandest galaxies to the smallest grains of sand, operates in harmony. There is a rhythm, a flow, an interconnectedness that binds all things together. You are part of that flow, not apart from it. Recognizing this truth dissolves the illusion of separation, and with it, the fear that arises from feeling alone or disconnected. When you understand that you are not separate from life, you begin to see challenges differently. They are no longer obstacles imposed by an uncaring universe. They are part of the natural unfolding of existence. Just as waves rise and fall in the ocean, challenges come and go in your life. They are not here to break you, but to shape you, to teach you, to help you grow. Fear loses its grip when you see these challenges as part of the same flow that carries you forward. Consider nature as a mirror of this truth. A tree does not resist the wind, it bends and sways with it. The wind is not an enemy to the tree, it is a partner in its growth, helping to strengthen its roots and branches. Similarly, the challenges you face are not separate from you, they are part of the same life force that shapes you. By embracing this interconnectedness, you find that fear has no need to define your experience. Instead, you move with life's currents, knowing that they are not separate from you, but a reflection of your own unfolding. This understanding also brings a profound sense of trust. When you know you are not separate from life, you realize that life is not working against you. It is working with you and through you. The very force that moves the planets and grows the forests is the same force that beats your heart and breathes your lungs. How can you fear a universe that is, in essence, your very being? Trust in this connection dissolves the need to control and replaces it with a calm assurance that you are supported, no matter what arises. Fear often whispers that you are vulnerable, but vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a gateway to deeper connection. When you drop the illusion of separateness, you open yourself to the flow of life, allowing it to move through you freely. You begin to see that vulnerability is not something to protect yourself from, but something to embrace. It is in your openness, your willingness to experience life fully, that you find true strength. To live fearlessly is to live in harmony with life, not apart from it. It is to see yourself as the wave and the ocean, the leaf and the tree, the dancer and the dance. This is not a lofty philosophical idea, it is a practical truth that transforms how you experience the world. When you understand that you are not separate from life, fear no longer controls you. You move with life instead of against it, trusting in its flow, and in that trust you find freedom. The fear dissolves, not because life becomes easy or predictable, but because you no longer see yourself as separate from its rhythm. You are life itself, fearless and free. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear, as though the truly brave feel nothing but confidence in the face of uncertainty. But this is not the reality of courage. Courage does not mean eradicating fear, it means acknowledging it, understanding it, and moving forward despite it. To become fearless is not to be devoid of fear, but to master it. Fear may always linger in the background, but it need not control your choices or dictate your life. Courage is the practice of stepping forward with fear as your companion, not your master. Imagine standing before a challenge that stirs fear within you. Your heart races, your mind conjures every possible negative outcome, and your body urges you to retreat. Fear arises naturally, it is a part of you, a response to the unknown. But here lies the secret: fear is not your enemy. It is simply a signal that you are on the edge of growth, that you are stepping into something meaningful. When you recognize fear for what it is, it becomes less threatening. It is no longer a force to flee from, but a guide that points to the path of expansion. Courage begins with a choice. It is the decision to act in spite of fear, to refuse to let fear dictate your actions. This does not mean you ignore fear or pretend it doesn't exist. On the contrary, you acknowledge it fully. You feel the tightness in your chest, the trembling in your hands, and the unease in your mind. But you also recognize that these sensations, as powerful as they feel, are not insurmountable. They are simply part of the human experience. To be courageous is to feel all of this and to act anyway. Mastering fear does not happen in a single moment. It is a process, a practice. Each time you face fear and choose to act despite it, you grow stronger. Courage is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more resilient it becomes. At first, the steps you take may feel small, almost insignificant, but each step builds upon the last, and soon you find yourself capable of things you once thought impossible. The courage to act despite fear is not reserved for extraordinary people. It is a quality you already possess, waiting to be cultivated. Fear, when embraced and understood, can even become a source of energy. It heightens your senses, sharpens your focus, and prepares you for action. The same adrenaline that makes your heart race in fear can be channeled into determination and resolve. Instead of letting fear paralyze you, you can use its energy to propel yourself forward. It is not about suppressing fear, but transforming it, allowing it to fuel your courage rather than your retreat. One of the most profound realizations about fear is that it often diminishes the moment you take action. The anticipation of a challenge is almost always more daunting than the challenge itself. Fear thrives in inaction, in the space where your mind can spin stories of worst-case scenarios. But when you step forward, even in small ways, you confront the reality of the situation. You begin to see that fear's grip is not as strong as it seemed. Action is the antidote to fear, and with each step you reclaim your power. Living courageously does not mean that you will never feel fear again. Fear is a natural response to life's uncertainties, and it will arise whenever you step beyond your comfort zone. But courage transforms your relationship with fear. It teaches you that fear is not an obstacle but an opportunity. It is a sign that you are pushing boundaries, that you are growing. To live fearlessly is to welcome this growth, to see fear not as something to avoid but as a necessary part of a vibrant, meaningful life. In the end, courage is about trust. Trust in yourself, in your ability to face whatever arises, and in the unfolding of life itself. It is the belief that no matter how uncertain or challenging the path may seem, you have the strength to walk it. This trust does not eliminate fear, but it puts it in its rightful place as a companion on your journey, not the driver of your decisions. When you cultivate courage, you discover that fear is not something to be defeated, but something to be understood and mastered. It becomes a tool, not a barrier, and in that mastery you become truly fearless. There comes a moment in a man's life when the world stops being a playground and becomes a storm. Everything you counted on begins to shift, the people, the promises, the plans. And it is in this collapse that a question echoes, not from the world, but from within. Who are you when there's nothing left to hold on to? A man may lift mountains with his arms, command the attention of rooms, and wield influence like a sword, yet still be fragile, easily shattered by a moment of silence, a betrayal, or the absence of validation. What is often mistaken for strength is merely performance. It is the shell, not the core. Real strength, the kind that cannot be stolen, manipulated, or worn thin, lives in the invisible. The strength that matters is not in what you project, but in what you can hold within. It is your ability to remain calm in the middle of chaos, your refusal to collapse under pressure, and your steady breath when life tries to shake the ground beneath you. This kind of strength is cultivated in solitude. It is not found in applause or agreement, but in your ability to sit with yourself completely, vulnerably, and without distraction. Most people build themselves outward. They collect titles, possessions, reputations. They believe that if they stack enough layers around their identity, they will become untouchable. But the man who builds outward and neglects his foundation is always at risk. The slightest crack in his image becomes a collapse. Because when your identity depends on things outside of yourself, success, admiration, control, then you are constantly at the mercy of the world, and the world is fickle. True strength arises when nothing external can shake your sense of self, when failure does not define you, when rejection does not wound you, when being unseen does not make you disappear. This inner fortitude is not loud. It is not interested in proving anything. It exists in quiet certainty, in grounded presence, in unshakable clarity. It comes from knowing who you are, not who you were told to be, not who you pretend. You become strong when you no longer fear being alone with your thoughts, when your peace is not tied to circumstances, but to your ability to observe them without being pulled apart. Strength is found in the pause between stimulus and response, in the choice to respond with grace rather than react with anger. It is the courage to feel pain fully rather than define you. The man who is internally strong does not need to dominate. He does not seek to control others or prove his worth through conflict. He understands that the greatest control is self-retrawn. He is aware of his emotions but not ruled by them. He walks into uncertainty without panic, not because he knows what will happen, but because he trusts himself to remain centered no matter what does. There is a quiet kind of power in someone who has nothing to hide, someone who has faced their own darkness, held their own shame, and chosen to rise above it, not by pretending it wasn't there, but by accepting it with honesty and compassion. That kind of man is not easily broken and rebuilt himself. He has shed the need to be perfect and instead chosen to be whole. When your strength is internal, your confidence becomes effortless. You no longer seek permission to exist. You do not chase validation or play roles to be accepted. You simply are. And in that being there is freedom. A freedom that can't be given, can't be bought, and most importantly, can't be taken. So many chase strength in the wrong direction. They try to armor themselves with achievement, to outrun fear with productivity, to silence doubt with noise. But the man who seeks strength inwardly realizes that true power is not about becoming more, but about shedding what is false. The layers of fear, comparison, pretense, they are the real burden. And letting them go reveals the solid ground beneath. This strength, the real kind, is like the earth. It does not need to shout. It does not need to move to make its presence known. It simply is, still, rooted, unbothered. That is the strength worth building. Not the kind that hardens you, but the kind that frees you. The kind that allows. Resilience is not resistance. It is not the clenching of fists or the tightening of the jaw. It is not about holding the line at all costs or pretending not to feel the weight of the world. Resilience is something far more fluid, far more intelligent. It is the quiet understanding that life will move with or without you, and the wisdom to move with it rather than against it. Many people mistake resilience for the ability to shut down emotion, to tough it out, to build walls so high that nothing can reach them. But walls don't make you resilient, they make you rigid. And anything rigid, when pressured long enough, will eventually crack. Real resilience bends. It doesn't break. It adapts. It listens. It learns. And most importantly, it lets go when. To be resilient is to understand that pain is not your enemy. Change is not your enemy. Discomfort, loss, fear, these are not signs that something has gone wrong. They are signs that something is moving, shifting, transforming. Resilience is the capacity to sit in that transformation without collapsing. It is not about pretending you're okay. It's about trusting that you will be, even if resistance, on the other hand, is the refusal to move. It's the need to control the uncontrollable, to deny what is unfolding, to cling to what is already gone. Resistance exhausts you because it fights the flow of life. Resilience nourishes you because it accepts the flow and adjusts within it. One drains you. There's a kind of beauty in watching someone who is truly resilient, not because they don't fall, but because they fall with grace. They allow themselves to feel what needs to be felt. They cry when it hurts. They rest when they're tired. But they never give up on rising. Their strength comes from their softness, not in spite of it. They know that resilience isn't about bracing for impact. It's about learning how to absorb impact. It's about learning how to absorb impact. The wind doesn't break the grass. It bends it. And when the storm passes, the grass is still there, still rooted, still alive. That is resilience. Not in resistance to the wind, but in surrendering to it just enough to survive, to adapt, to remain. You do not become less by bending. You become wise. When you resist, you close. You shut out what could have helped you grow. You tighten yourself in fear of falling apart. But the very act of resistance begins to wear you down. Your energy is spent trying to hold everything in place, trying to keep the narrative, the identity, the expectation from crumbling. But resilience is born the moment you stop trying to preserve what no longer fits and start trusting your ability to rebuild something better. There is no shame in changing shape. There is no weakness in adjusting course. The tree that weathers the storm is the one with deep roots and flexible branches. You don't have to be unshakable to be strong. You just have to keep standing after the shaking ends. Resilience is also about listening to yourself, to your needs, to the silent voice within that knows when it's time to act and when it's time to pause. Resistance keeps you in constant noise, constant struggle. Resilience teaches you to hear the rhythm of your own life and trust it. And yes, there are times when pain will knock the breath out of you, when grief or failure will sit so heavy on your chest that rising feels impossible. But resilience is not about avoiding those moments. It is about facing them fully and reminding yourself that even now, you are allowed to begin again. You are not required to be perfect. You are not expected to have all the answers. Resilience allows space for mistakes. It allows space for healing. It says, take your time, but don't stop. It whispers when the world screams. It steadies you when everything else tries to pull you apart. To be resilient is to accept that life will not always be kind, but you can be kind to yourself through it. That life will not always be fair, but you can still choose what kind of person you want to be in response. That life will change and change again, but you can change with it without losing your center. There is quiet power in that, a power that doesn't need armor or aggression, a power that lives in openness, in adaptability, in trust. That is what it means to be truly resilient, and that is something no one can take from you. Suffering is not something to run from, though everything within us might scream to escape it. It is not a mistake in the design of life, but rather a deep part of it. Suffering arrives not to punish, but to reveal. It shows us where we are still attached, still afraid, still believing in illusions. And if we allow it, if we stop resisting and begin to listen, suffering becomes one of our greatest teachers. Pain often comes when something is misaligned, when the reality of life collides with the stories we've told ourselves. We suffer when people don't meet our expectations, when the world refuses to be what we want it to be, when we lose what we thought we needed to survive. But beneath the surface of that pain is a mirror. It reflects who we truly are, stripped of pretense. It shows us the raw truth, not the filtered version we present, but the one we often hide even from ourselves. To embrace suffering is not to seek it or glorify it. It is to stop fighting it when it comes. Most suffering becomes worse, not because of the pain itself, but because of our resistance to it. We want it gone. We want things to return to how they were. But life does not move backward. It moves through. And the only way out is through as well. When you sit with suffering, not to analyze or judge it, but simply to witness it, something shifts. You begin to notice where you've been holding on too tightly, where fear has governed your decisions, where avoidance has become a way of life. Suffering teaches not by giving answers, but by burning away what isn't true. It strips the ego, it humbles, and in that humility, real wisdom begins to grow. There are truths that can only be learned in the dark. Joy can teach us to love the world, but suffering teaches us how to love ourselves, especially when everything falls apart. It shows us whether our love for life is conditional, based only on pleasure and ease, or whether it is deeper, rooted in something unshakable. The man who has suffered deeply and stayed open through it walks with a different kind of presence. He does not flinch at the pain of others, because he has seen his own and made peace with it. Suffering reveals the fragility of what we depend on, but it also uncovers the strength we didn't know we had. You begin to see that your worth was never in the things you lost, that your peace was never meant to come from the outside, that the deepest parts of you were waiting to be discovered, not in comfort, but in the fire. To embrace suffering is to accept that pain is not always a sign that something has gone wrong. Sometimes it is a sign that something is waking up, something within you that has been dormant, an awareness, a resilience, a deeper sense of compassion. When you allow suffering to move through you without numbing it, without suppressing it, it carves out a deeper space within you. And in that space you become more human, more whole. People often ask why life includes so much suffering, as if it were a flaw in the system. But perhaps it is not about escaping pain, but about what pain awakens. Without the winters of life, we would never appreciate the spring. Without loss, we would not understand value. Without failure, growth would remain a concept, not a reality. Suffering is not the end, it is the beginning of a deeper life. This does not mean that suffering is easy or that we should become indifferent to it. It can shake us to the core. It can bring us to our knees. But the invitation is to kneel, not in defeat, but in reverence. Because there is something sacred being formed in the silence between each wave of grief, in the stillness after the collapse. Let your suffering soften you. Let it open your eyes. Let it guide you to the places inside that still need healing. You don't have to be consumed by it to be taught by it. You only need to be present with it long enough to hear what it's trying to say. That is where transformation begins, not in escape, but in surrender. And slowly as you emerge from the other side, you find that you are not who you were before. You are deeper, quieter, wiser. You have touched something eternal. And in that space, you no longer fear the storms. You no longer fear the strength you had all along. Detachment from the ego is not a rejection of self. It is not the erasing of identity or the denial of one's uniqueness. It is instead the quiet realization that the ego is a mask, one you've worn for so long that you may have forgotten it's not your face. To detach from ego is to return to your essence, not to abandon who you are, but to uncover it beneath layers of conditioning, comparison, and the need to validation. The ego thrives on image. It defines you by what you do, what you have, what others think of you. It whispers that you are your accomplishments, your failures, your status, your story. It needs control, it needs praise, and it fears being nothing. But the truth is, you are not diminished when you let go of these illusions. You are set free. Detaching from ego doesn't make you less yourself. It makes you more real. The ego resists change. It wants to hold tightly to a fixed idea of who you are, even if that idea causes suffering. It would rather stay in the comfort of limitation than risk the uncertainty of growth. Identity, on the other hand, is fluid. It evolves. Your true identity is not a static label, but a living presence. It moves with life, not against it. When you release the ego's need to be seen a certain way, many people fear that letting go of ego will make them invisible, soft, or weak. But detachment is not disappearance. It is clarity. You become someone who no longer needs to prove their worth in every room they walk into. You no longer chase applause. You no longer define yourself by reactions. And yet, you are more rooted in your being than ever before. You walk lighter, but you walk with more truth. Your identity is not a brand, not a collection of traits for display. It is the quiet sum of your lived experiences, your values, your passions, your voice. It is the truth you return to when the world becomes too loud. Ego is the noise. Identity is the music underneath. Detachment from ego allows that music to rise, unfiltered and unforced. When you let go of ego, you begin to act from purpose rather than pride. You start to listen more than you speak. You no longer need to dominate conversations or be the smartest person in the room. You become a student again, humble enough to learn, wise enough to know there is always more to learn. Ego blocks growth by convincing you that you already know. Detachment opens the door to something deeper. There is no need to discard your identity to find peace. You do not have to dissolve into nothingness to be spiritual, wise, or awakened. In fact, it is through your identity that you express your essence in the world, your love of art, your way of speaking, your curiosity, your kindness. These are not ego. These are expressions of your true nature. When you strip away ego, what remains is a clearer, purer version of the self. Ego attaches itself to comparison. It thrives on being better than, smarter than, more accomplished than others. Identity does not need comparison to exist. It simply is. It finds joy in being, not in competing. When you detach from ego, you stop measuring yourself against someone else's life. You realize there is nothing to prove and nothing to defend. You are no longer at war with yourself. This does not mean you abandon confidence or ambition. On the contrary, you move with deeper confidence because you are no longer driven by fear. You are no longer performing. You are simply being. And in that being there is power. Not the loud power that demands attention, but the quiet power that draws people in, not to your image, but to your presence. The more you detach from ego, the more you discover how often it was fear pretending to be strength. How often it was insecurity pretending to be drive. When you stop clinging to who you think you're supposed to be, you become more intimate with who you actually are. You live from essence, not expectation. You still have a voice. You still have a role to play. You still have a name, a past, a path. But you are no longer trapped by them. You are free to grow, to change, to become. You are not here to protect a fixed version of yourself. You are here to unfold, moment by moment, into something more honest. And in that unfolding, you do not lose your identity, you awaken it. Stillness is often misunderstood. In a world constantly moving, constantly demanding, stillness can be mistaken for laziness, passivity, or weakness. But this is only because most people have never truly experienced it. Real stillness is not the absence of action, but the presence of depth. It is not retreat from life, but the courage to face it without flinching, without reacting, without escaping. It is where true power is born, not the power to control others, but the power to master oneself. Stillness is the space between impulse and action. It is the silence before the storm, not of fear, but of clarity. Most people live in reaction. Something happens, and they respond instantly, driven by emotion, by fear, by habit. But stillness creates a pause, a breath, a sacred space where choice becomes possible. It is in this space that wisdom speaks. In that silence you remember who you are. The man who can sit in stillness and observe his own mind without judgment is stronger than the one who shouts the loudest or moves the fastest. He is rooted, unshaken by chaos, undisturbed by noise. His strength does not need to be announced. It radiates. Stillness allows you to hear the world not as you wish it to be, but as it truly is. And more importantly, it allows you to hear yourself. Stillness is not the absence of thought, but the absence of attachment to thought. It is watching your fears rise without letting them rule you. It is observing your anger, your desire, your pain, not to deny them, but to understand them. In that understanding, something miraculous happens. They begin to lose their grip. What once controlled you now becomes visible, and what is visible can no longer hide in the shadows. This is why stillness is power. Because when the world pulls at you, when people test you, when the storms come, and they will, you remain unmoved. Not because you are numb, but because you have anchored yourself deeper than the surface. You no longer respond from habit, but from awareness. Your actions are not reactions. They are deliberate, grounded, and clear. The mind fears stillness because it cannot control it. It cannot predict what will arise in silence. But that is exactly why you must enter it. In stillness, the masks fall away, the distractions vanish. You meet yourself face to face without filter. It is here that you discover the difference between who you think you are and who you truly are. And that discovery is the foundation of all real power. Most people seek to dominate circumstances, to manipulate outcomes, to impose their will on life. But the man who has tasted stillness understands that true power lies not in forcing the river, but in understanding its flow. He does not swim against it blindly. He does not panic when the current shifts. He becomes one with it, not passive but present. He does not need to force because he sees. He sees clearly what others miss in their rush to control. Stillness is not inaction. It is the highest form of action. It is the action that arises from knowing, not guessing. It is the strength that comes from having nothing to prove. You can walk into any room without raising your voice and still shift the energy. You can face any conflict without aggression and still hold your ground. That is the power of stillness. It needs no defense. It needs no explanation. It just is. In stillness, you begin to realize that much of what you were chasing was noise. That the approval, the comparison, the constant doing, all of it was a distraction from the present moment. And in the present, you find everything you were seeking outside of yourself. Peace, clarity, power. You begin to act not out of desperation but from alignment, not to. Stillness reveals the inner landscape, the terrain of your thoughts, your patterns, your wounds. And with that awareness, you begin to heal. You begin to choose better. You begin to live intentionally. Life no longer drags you. You move with it. You don't shrink in silence. You expand. You become grounded not in image, but in truth. To cultivate stillness is to reclaim your power. Not the fleeting kind built on attention or approval, but the enduring kind rooted in presence. The kind that does not depend on circumstance. The kind that cannot be shaken by praise or destroyed by criticism. When you carry stillness within you, the world may move around you, but it does not move you. And in that immovable presence, you become unbreakable. When a man learns to embrace stillness, to detach from ego, to welcome suffering as a teacher, and to embody resilience, not as resistance, but as inner flow, he steps into a rare kind of strength, a strength that does not shout, yet echoes, a strength not built on appearances, but on awareness. He no longer needs to be seen to know his worth. He no longer fears loss because he has found himself. He is calm in chaos, clear in confusion, and grounded in storms. This is the man who can't be broken, because his power is not borrowed. It is built from within.